warning. Imagine, if you will, an insurgent rebel group.
Right.
They're heavily armed, internationally sanctioned, and currently engaged in a brutal proxy war. But suddenly, they take on the responsibilities of the World Health Organization. Today, that is exactly what has happened.
It is a striking situation. Good morning.
You are joining us for a comprehensive and objective assessment of current global events. Now, this deep dive is brought to you by ProWave AI, and the intelligence you will hear today is generated by Stylo News. That is the AI-powered news application.
And it's important to note at the outset that Stylo News is actually the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software.
Yes, exactly.
That is a platform traditionally reserved strictly for enterprise operations, government agencies, and the military.
Right. Which means for you, the listener, you now possess unique access to the very same analytical tools designed to support global decision makers. The official title of today's deep dive is Proxy Wars and Ebola Pandemic Risks, the Central Africa Security Brief.
A very heavy topic today.
Indeed. We will be covering the Central Africa region, assessing intelligence reports spanning from late May to mid-June of 2026. The mission of this brief is to objectively analyze the primary patterns of events, identify the key actors involved, and evaluate the localized and international impacts over the past 2 weeks.
And as we navigate this material, I want to emphasize that our goal is strictly analytical. We are here to present the facts on the ground, explore different courses of action, and maintain a completely neutral perspective.
Right, just the fact.
Exactly. The political landscape in Central Africa is highly complex, so our focus is to provide you with clarity on these intersecting events without generating fear or taking sides. We will examine the data objectively to understand the current security environment.
So to really grasp the sheer scale of the instability rippling across Central Africa right now, we have to look at the geographical engine of this conflict. And that engine is the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, or the DRC.
Yes, the epicenter.
We are not just looking at a localized rebellion here. We are observing overlapping insurgencies in a highly volatile region that are actively drawing in neighboring sovereign states. According to the intelligence estimates from the past 2 weeks, the M23 insurgent group, which is also operating under the banner of the Congo River Alliance, or AFC, well, they remain the most militarily consequential anti-state actor in the theater.
They do. And they aren't just hiding in the jungle.
Exactly. They currently maintain massive influence and, in some sectors, direct administrative control over major economic hubs like Goma and Bukavu.
That is correct, and the operational reality of that control is quite severe. Alongside M23's conventional military maneuvering, we are tracking significant human rights violations.
Yes, the reports there are grim.
Very grim. Recent reports from Human Rights Watch allege that both M23 and Rwandan military forces have been involved in the forced recruitment and detention of thousands of individuals in eastern DRC. But it is crucial to understand that M23 does not operate in a vacuum. It is an incredibly crowded battlefield. You also have the FDLR, which is a heavily armed anti-Rwanda group operating in the exact same terrain.
And the Wazalendo militias, right?
Precisely. The Wazalendo is essentially an umbrella term for various pro-government local civilian militias that have taken up arms.
And this is where the intelligence shows a severe regionalization of the conflict. I mean, it is officially spilling over the borders. We have verified reports confirming that Burundi has deployed approximately 1,300 of its own troops into the South Kivu province of the DRC.
And they are ostensibly there in support of the Congolese National Army.
Right. So we're looking at a highly tense proxy environment involving the sovereign militaries of the DRC, Rwanda, and Burundi. It is like a chessboard, but one where the sovereign nations are moving independent, heavily armed proxy pieces across a very porous board.
That is an apt comparison.
If we look at the perspectives of the key decision makers here, the DRC and Burundi officially view the M23 as an aggressive, expansionist force directly backed and supplied by Rwanda.
Right. Conversely, Rwanda maintains the hardline position that the FDLR presents an existential national security threat to its own borders.
Yeah.
And they accuse the Congolese government of actively collaborating with the FDLR.
Exactly. And in an attempt to manage this escalating proxy friction, the international community has tried to pull diplomatic levers. The United States recently applied targeted financial sanctions against both M23 leaders and FDLR-linked figures.
The objective of that specific course of action is to enforce ceasefire commitments evenly and apply pressure to all belligerents simultaneously without taking a side in the regional dispute.
But looking at the intelligence, I have to question the efficacy of that approach. I mean, if sanctions are being applied equally to both M23 and FDLR figures, why does intelligence suggest these diplomatic moves are failing to de-escalate the facts on the ground? Applying financial sanctions to rebel commanders in the jungle feels, well, a bit disconnected from reality.
It does seem that way.
It is like trying to turn off a building's water supply by closing a valve miles down the road while the insurgents are drinking directly from a fire hose in the basement. That fire hose in this case being the local mines. Sanctions assume these actors care about international banking, but the reality on the ground suggests they only care about physical territory, right?
That is an excellent way to frame it. The fire hose analogy perfectly captures the disconnect between international diplomacy and local tactical realities.
Right.
The reason diplomatic levers like targeted sanctions consistently fail to de-escalate the violence is that the timeline of international diplomacy does not match the immediate daily priorities of the actors on the ground.
Because they are focused on the immediate resources.
Exactly. Insurgent commanders prioritize immediate territorial control because that grants them access to incredibly lucrative mineral resources. For instance, the mining areas around Rwanda in North Kivu are strategically vital for coltan and tantalum.
Minerals essential for global electronics?
Precisely. Which means the actual ground they are standing on is worth far more to them than any foreign bank account. Control over those mineral revenues provides the direct, untraceable financial lifeblood required to purchase weapons, pay fighters, and sustain military operations.
Right, so the sanctions are virtually invisible to them.
They are. When a group's immediate survival and capacity for expansion rely on the physical, armed control of a mine today, the threat of an international financial sanction tomorrow simply does not carry enough coercive weight to force a ceasefire. Therefore, the diplomatic tracks remain entirely stalled while the military maneuvering accelerates.
And this leads us to the most alarming aspect of this intelligence brief. Because the movement of displaced people and unchecked proxy militias doesn't just destabilize borders, it creates the perfect biological vector.
Yes, the public health dimension.
We must now examine how this exact same contested terrain in the eastern DRC is simultaneously being struck by an expanding public health crisis and persistent terrorism. The convergence of a proxy war and a highly infectious disease compounds the danger exponentially for both local populations and international decision makers.
Indeed.
Over the current reporting period, a worsening Ebola outbreak has surpassed 600 confirmed cases, spreading across eastern DRC and pushing into neighboring Uganda.
The epidemiological facts are grim, but the security implications of those facts are profound. This Ebola outbreak has become a severe security multiplier. In a standard public health crisis, you deploy contact tracers and set up isolation wards. But how do you trace contacts when the population is actively fleeing gunfire?
You simply can't.
You can't. We have verified reports that Red Cross volunteers attempting to manage this outbreak have been violently attacked. Furthermore, an Ebola hospital ward in the DRC was recently burned to the ground by a localized mob. Public health operations are not being viewed as medical aid. They are actively being treated as hostile foreign interventions.
Wow. And within this same restricted, chaotic environment, we also have to factor in transnational terrorism. The Allied Democratic Forces, or the ADF, which is aligned with the Islamic State Central Africa province, well, they remain a highly lethal and persistent threat.
They are very active.
Yes. Recent intelligence shows they assassinated a Congolese colonel in the Haut-Uele district. They have also launched multiple coordinated assaults on the FARDC, the Congolese National Army, specifically targeting military positions along the RN4 transport corridor in Ituri province.
The ADF's actions there are highly strategic. They retain the capability to execute targeted killings, but by attacking the RN4 corridor, they are deliberately disrupting vital supply lines. But if we want to talk about strategic adaptation, perhaps one of the most notable intelligence insights from the past 2 weeks involves M23 and the health crisis.
Oh, this is the part that really stood out to me.
Yes. Reporting indicates that M23 is actively attempting to set up its own public health response structure to manage the Ebola outbreak within the territories it militarily controls.
Wait, practically speaking, what does an M23-run Ebola ward actually look like? Are we talking about rebel soldiers in hazmat suits? How does an armed group manage complex medical logistics?
Well, it is a crude but effective co-opting of existing infrastructure. They aren't flying in their own medical supplies. Instead, intelligence suggests they secure local clinics, force the remaining civilian medical staff to continue working.
Under the barrel of a gun.
Exactly, out of the barrel of a gun, and they utilize whatever basic PPE and supplies were left behind or smuggled in through their supply chains. They enforce quarantines not through public health messaging, but through strict military checkpoints and the threat of lethal force.
But why take on that burden? When an insurgent group like M23 tries to administer an Ebola response, how does that fundamentally change the outbreak from a medical emergency into a tool for political legitimacy?
Hmm?
I mean, why not just ignore it or let international aid workers in?
Because it alters the geopolitical dynamics entirely. Legitimacy is the ultimate currency for an insurgency. When a group like M23 provides essential public services, even something as complex as disease containment, they are functioning as a de facto state.
Ah, so they are proving they can govern.
Exactly. They are demonstrating to the local population and broadcasting to the international community that they possess actual governance capabilities in the total absence of the official government. Simultaneously, the ambient violence of their conflict naturally keeps legitimate international health organizations out of the region.
So they create the problem and then offer themselves as the only solution.
Precisely. M23 creates a vacuum of services through warfare, steps in to fill that vacuum, and thereby cements their authority over the civilian population.
The narrative surrounding this crisis varies wildly depending on where you look, which obviously complicates the intelligence picture. Traditional media outlets like Africa News, Al Jazeera, the BBC, they're largely focused on the epidemiological facts, the rising case counts, and the official containment efforts led by the World Health Organization.
Right, the official track.
But when we analyze social media sentiment, specifically monitoring hashtags like hashtag Ebola DRC on platforms like X, a very different and much darker picture emerges. The intelligence highlights heavy, localized rumor traffic linking the Ebola outbreak to international mineral trafficking, alongside widespread anti-foreign disinformation campaigns.
That divergence is critical for decision makers to track. The social media sentiment isn't just background noise. It reflects deep-seated local distrust, which directly fuels the mob violence we mentioned against the health workers.
If they believe the virus is a cover story.
Exactly. If the local population believes the virus is a fabricated excuse for foreigners to steal coltan, they will attack the doctors.
Now, this instability in the eastern borderlands is not occurring in a vacuum. A fire that hot eventually spreads. This brief will now shift to how this insecurity is rippling outward, destabilizing the broader Central African region and creating brand new critical vulnerabilities within the state capitals themselves.
Yes, we are seeing regional contagion.
Let us assess the Central African Republic, or GRR. The intelligence maintains that GRR remains chronically fragile anywhere outside of its capital city, Bangui. The vast majority of its territory is an ungoverned space, and the state is heavily dependent on external security forces just to maintain a baseline of order. In fact, there are currently unverified reports indicating that Portuguese commandos may be deploying to GRR to support UN-backed counterinsurgency operations.
The situation in GRR really highlights the geographical limits of state control in this part of the world. Bangui is effectively an island of control in a sea of fragility. And if we look back at the DRC, we are starting to see instability manifest right in the political center.
Right, the protests.
Yes. In Kinshasa, the capital of the DRC, violent anti-government protests recently erupted over potential constitutional changes. The intelligence details reports of gunfire occurring near the National Assembly, alongside confirmed casualties among the civilian demonstrators.
Now, that detail genuinely shifts my perspective. We usually treat this as a borderland issue, confined to the jungles of the eastern provinces hundreds of miles away. But if violence is erupting directly at the National Assembly in Kinshasa, does this mean the core of the state is now just as vulnerable as the periphery?
It signifies a highly dangerous division of attention. The core of any state relies on its elite security apparatus to maintain control and project power. When urban political unrest forces a government to deploy its best security units, the Republican Guard, the specialized police, just to protect government buildings and manage protests in the capital, it inherently stretches those resources to the breaking point.
Leaving the borders exposed.
Exactly. This division of attention inadvertently creates a much wider security vacuum out in the distant eastern provinces. It essentially gives groups like the ADF and M23 far more physical space and operational freedom to maneuver, simply because the state's eye is momentarily focused inward on its own political survival in Kinshasa.
Having established the facts on the ground across the military, public health, and political domains, we need to synthesize this intelligence to project the most likely trajectory for the region in the near term.
Right.
According to the intelligence consensus across the reporting period, the primary risk facing decision makers is not a massive conventional interstate war. We aren't expecting tank battalions rolling across borders. Rather, analysts point to what is termed a compound crisis,
Yes, a compound crisis.
which implies a sustained, grinding period of localized conflict escalation, extremely high cross-border militant mobility, and ongoing narrative-driven public unrest.
And a compound crisis is exceptionally difficult to solve because fixing one element often exacerbates another. Listeners monitoring this region should watch for specific, verifiable indicators in the coming weeks. First, track any M23 troop movements or logistical buildups near the major urban centers of Goma and Bukavu.
Okay, troop movements.
Second, watch for further disruptions to cross-border trade, particularly at the Kasindi-Mpondwe border crossing between Uganda and the DRC. That economic artery is currently under heavy strain due to the mandatory Ebola screening controls. Finally, monitor any potential spillover violence involving Rwandan and Burundian proxy forces clashing directly in the South Kivu region.
It is important to note the sources and the broad common viewpoints found in this intelligence estimate across all monitored platforms, ranging from highly specialized terrorism monitors on X to global humanitarian watchers like Human Rights Watch and regional news broadcasters like Radio Okapi. There is a unified, grim consensus. The diplomatic track is currently viewed as completely stalled.
Stalled on all fronts.
Furthermore, the operational risk to international personnel, humanitarian aid operations, and diplomatic travel in the region is at a critical high.
Summarizing the courses of action available to the international community, the options are incredibly delicate and full of friction. Containing the Ebola virus, which is an absolute global imperative, will likely require health organizations to negotiate safe access corridors directly with non-state actors and sanctioned insurgencies like M23.
Which is a massive diplomatic hurdle.
It is a highly complex diplomatic maneuver. It risks inadvertently conferring the exact political legitimacy that these groups are actively seeking. The international community is forced to weigh the immediate, desperate requirement of pandemic containment against the long-term geopolitical consequences of officially engaging with armed rebellions.
Okay, let's unpack this. And you know what? Let's just drop the 1960s news anchor persona for a second. We are back in 2026, and I have to say, it is pretty amazing that we can access this level of global intelligence directly from our phones.
Right. It really is a complete paradigm shift in how we process information. It takes an incredibly dense web of variables and, well, makes them comprehensible.
Exactly. So, for everyone listening, I want to explain exactly how we put this deep dive together today. It is all thanks to Stylo News. Stylo News is this incredibly powerful mobile and computer app that you can download right now. It allows you to customize your own personal intelligence-style briefs, just like the one we walked through today.
What's truly fascinating here is the sheer volume of data it synthesizes to find those hidden connections. I mean, it isn't just reading one or two Western newspapers.
Right. It analyzes literally hundreds of traditional news sources globally, plus it pulls in real-time sentiment data from X. And the best part is the AI location bot. It actually maps these events out for you geographically.
Oh, the mapping feature is incredible.
Yeah, plus it has this multilingual intelligence feature that translates over 20 languages in a matter of seconds. So you aren't just getting the external perspective, you are getting the local, on-the-ground reports, translated instantly and packaged into an executive intelligence report. If you want to stop feeling overwhelmed by the news and start actually understanding the mechanisms behind it, you need to subscribe. You can get AI-powered news on demand right now at www.stylonews.com. That's stylonews.com.
So if we connect all of this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with one final concept to mull over. We spent a lot of time discussing how this Ebola outbreak is being handled by insurgent groups rather than a state. As climate change accelerates and global mobility increases, the weaponization of public health emergencies in active conflict zones may become standard operating procedure rather than a rare exception.
Wow, that is a chilling thought. I mean, a virus doesn't respect a ceasefire line.
It really doesn't. And it raises a vital question for the future. How will our global institutions adapt when the next major global pandemic originates in a territory that is controlled not by a recognized sovereign government, but by a heavily sanctioned insurgency?
Yeah, that is definitely something that will stick with me. We started today talking about how murky the diagnostic landscape is when you look at Central Africa, how the X-ray machine of traditional diplomacy seems totally broken. It is clear that understanding this region requires looking at the disease, the proxies, and the politics all at once. Thank you so much for joining us and listening to this deep dive. We always want to know what you want to learn about next, so please submit your requests for future topics. And don't forget to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms so you can track global intelligence instantly. Until next time.